going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.
Alrighty, and everybody, welcome into this Wednesday edition of the Mark My Words College Sports Show here on the X Sports Network. I'm your host, Michael Marks, and was going to try to run some spots before this, but of course, when I want to run something, it decides not to work. But nonetheless, that's not going to keep us down. We got a lot to talk about today, got some fun stuff. We'll talk about a little bit of everything. We got some news, we got some coach firings, we're going to go back and we're going to look at the Week 1 AP poll and compare it to now. We're about a third of the way through the season, so it's a good time to do an update. We'll talk about teams that have been surprising and disappointing so far this year. We'll look at some Power 4 conference standings. We'll look at coaches that have been fired, some other coaches, stuff that happened last week. We'll look at Heisman odds, and then a fun little topic to end the show, so we'll jump right in. And this was something that happened last week. Wasn't able to talk about it, but the ACC is now joining the rest of the Power 4 conferences and have announced a 9-game conference schedule to be implemented into the 2027 college football season, so not next year, but the following season, and have joined the SEC in requiring each team to also face off against a non-conference Power 4 school or Notre Dame. So the ACC has an odd number of teams, so that there are some weird things with conference scheduling. Some teams will have one less game or something like that. But I think it's great. Started off with the Pac-10 all the way back in 2006. Then the Big 12 picked it up. Then the Big 10 picked it up. And now, recently in the last 2 or 3 years, now the SEC and now the ACC is joining. So now everybody, at least in the Power 4 ranks, it has a uniform in the amount of conference games you're playing. I do know that the SEC and the ACC require another non-conference Power 4 opponent. So I think this is great for college football. We're going to get more big-time matchups, and we're not going to have one of those Saturdays where we're watching, I'll pick an ACC team, Miami. We don't have to watch Miami beat up on South Florida. Was ended up being a bigger game leading into it than most thought. But we'll avoid more matchups like that. Colorado did not enjoy their Saturday night. They were facing off against BYU, and the Big 12 has decided to fine Colorado $50,000 for inappropriate chants during the game versus BYU this past weekend. Videos online surfaced showing chants of an expletive, a 4-letter expletive starting with the letter F, followed by the Mormons during the game. And, when I initially read this, I'm like, why are we fining schools for an inappropriate chant? There are much worse things, being said. But, when it has to do with an entire religion, I do think that that's probably a good time to step in and kind of lay the hammer down. So Colorado went 0 for 2 against BYU this weekend. This was some more news that came out yesterday. UCLA and offensive coordinator Tino Sunseri have mutually agreed to part ways. The team announced yesterday. This comes after an 0-4 start to the season for UCLA. I mean, we've beat up. I know that we've beat up the Bruins more than most shows probably will. But an 0-4 start where the Bruins offense only mustered more than 14 points once, and that was against UNLV. And the Rebels they're running Rebels 103rd out of 136 FBS teams in play calling and points allowed. Play calling duties have been handed over to the tight end coach Jerry Neuheisel, the former UCLA quarterback and son of former UCLA head coach Rick Neuheisel. It's going to be a lot trying to turn around UCLA this year. We'll take a quick peek at the remainder of their schedule because it's brutal. They got thrown in with Washington and Oregon and USC into the Big Ten, and they're kind of the one team that hasn't responded the best. Obviously, this Saturday they have Penn State coming out there to Southern Cal, so that'll be a fun matchup, but probably won't go well for the Bruins. The next week they have to travel to Michigan State. Michigan State's 3-1 on the year. They've looked really good minus their one loss in there. And then the week after that, they host Maryland. Maryland 4-0 on the year, as hot as really any team in the Big Ten in terms of teams that we didn't expect going into the year. The following week, they got to go out to Indiana, play the Hoosiers in Bloomington. And we saw how that went for a ranked team. A team without a win probably won't fare much better. Then the next week they host. Following week they're off. They get the start of November off, but then play 4 straight games at home against Nebraska, at Ohio State, home against Washington, and at USC. Not much of a travel there, but I mean it's brutal for the remainder of their schedule. They don't play a team with, as of now, through 4 games. And I get everybody's getting their non-conference games out of the way. But the remainder of their schedule doesn't have a team that has more than 1 loss. And most of them are pretty formidable teams. I've bashed Penn State as much as anybody as well, but I think that they'll get their first Power 4 win against UCLA this weekend. Michigan State has looked really good. Maryland's looked really well. I mean, I really do think that this UCLA team squandered any chance they had at a win in weeks 2 through 4, where they lost to UNLV, New Mexico, and Northwestern. I didn't think they were going to beat Utah week 1, but man, it has only gone downhill from there. UCLA is going to be in need of a lot of help after this season when they decide to join the coaching search and look for something. And my mind just takes me back to April when there were reports from Knoxville that Nico Iamaleava was unhappy with what was going on at Tennessee. He didn't think he was being paid enough. He didn't think that he had enough talent around him. And so he transfers to UCLA because, quote unquote, the offense was a better fit for him. And, well, UCLA is scoring 14.25 points per game and have an 0-4 record. Tennessee at 51 points per game and a 4-1 record. And Tennessee's offense is doing things that Tennessee offenses have never done before, and that's not just a Tennessee fan talking. That is actual stats that this team has scored 40 points in every game this year. That is the first time in program history that they've scored 40-plus in 5 straight games. And, despite having a bye week this week, I think they'll be able to get back on the train of scoring a lot of points, because obviously the team they are facing, their next game after this bye week is against the team that has already done a complete overhaul pretty much of their coaching staff in the middle of the season. So now I want to do something. I think we're about a third of the way through the season, week 6. I want to take a look at the week 1 AP poll. And I want to compare it to what we have yesterday. I was just trying to think of, and I was looking back at some week 1 games and some rankings besides some of these teams that I was just really surprised about. So we'll go to week 1, the preseason poll. Texas at number 1. Well, since then, Texas has played 4 games. They're 3-1. And, I mean, coming into the season, I can see why they were the number 1 ranked team in the country. You had Arch. You had a lot of that defense coming back. You knew what Sark was going to be doing on offense, and really none of that worked. I mean, you lose the week 1 game 14-7 to Ohio State. You have concerns about your quarterback, and weeks 2 and 3 didn't really help. Week 4 against Sam Houston may have helped him get a little bit of confidence back, but Texas is in a rough spot. And the number 2 team in the country, Penn State, another preseason team that also doesn't have a Power 4 win yet this year. So AP poll is looking great for week 1. Penn State, they've, similar to Texas, had a ton of hype coming into the year and got their big showdown with Oregon. And, preseason, I probably would have said Penn State will win that game by 2 scores. I think Oregon was drastically underrated to start the season. And, funny enough that the week 1 AP poll to now, Penn State and Oregon have flipped spots from 2 to 7. Ohio State 3rd. I mean, I think that was a fair spot to put them in the preseason, looking at all they lost. You lost a bunch of guys from that defense the year before. You lost a bunch of your playmakers on offense, and you lose your defensive coordinator. Well, you get Matt Patricia, a former NFL guy that knows a lot about football, a lot about defense, and you bring in not a ton of huge names. You kind of stay in-house with most for the most part, and they replace those guys tremendously. I think they're in a similar spot with Ole Miss, where they may not have as many big names now, but they got some dudes. Number 4, Clemson. This one really makes you scratch your head now. But you look at what Clemson was supposed to be, obviously, coming into the year. I've said this about everybody. You got Cade Klubnik coming back. You got a good young running back. You got Antonio Williams. You got that defensive line. You got those linebackers. And this team made the playoffs the year before, won the ACC. I mean, if you watch the playoff game against Texas, Texas was really never in doubt in that one. So... And really, the only reason that Clemson made the playoff was because they won the ACC title game against an SMU team that was also ranked a little too high in this preseason. We're starting to see that maybe the ACC, is it as good as we think? Is it better than we think? We don't know, because they were underrated big time coming into the year, minus Clemson. Georgia at number 5, that's where they stayed until this past week after the loss to Alabama. I think that's a good spot for them. Georgia was a good team coming into the year. Notre Dame at 6. They're in the mid-20s now, and look, they suffered 2 big losses. You had the loss to Miami week 1. You had the loss to Texas A&M in week 3. They faced 2 really tough opponents looking at the AP poll now. Miami 3, A&M 6. That's combined losses to by 4 points to those 2 teams. And your other 2 games, you looked really good. So, I don't know if we'll see Notre Dame as high as 6 again this year, but I do think that if they win out, will have a good chance to make the playoff. Oregon at 7, we didn't know much about them coming into the year. We didn't know how Dante Moore was going to look. You lost a lot of talent from that offense the year before, and that offense was the one that got smoked by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. So, obviously with Dan Lanning there and all the money that Nike's able, Phil Knight and all those guys are able to put into NIL, you're never going to be worried about Oregon, but you definitely had some concerns coming into the year. Alabama at 8, I think that's a fair spot for them. They're at number 10 right now, and the tough week 1 loss to Florida State. They looked terrible in that game. But really, it seems like they whipped themselves into shape after that. The win against UL Monroe, the wins against Wisconsin, and then the big win against Georgia on the road last week, I think was a big win. And a big reason that they're back in the top 10 now. LSU at number 9 in the preseason poll. They are now, I believe, 13. Look, we saw the patellar tendonitis thing with Nussmeier late in the summer. I think it was early August, first or second week of August. It was around the time training camp started, and there were some whispers of a knee injury for Garrett Nussmeier. Some people thought it was a torn ACL. Some people thought that it was just a myth. It was bad enough that Brian Kelly was breaking into press conferences with other guys and just saying, "Hey, we're." And Brian Kelly press conferences are another discussion for another day. And coming in and saying, "Hey, we're fine. Our guy's fine," and you can just tell the ball that Garrett Nussmeier's trying to throw has no zip on it. Go watch a game from last year and go watch a game from this year. Just go the Ole Miss game. Watch it from last week. Watch it from last year. It looks like 2 completely different quarterbacks, honestly. I don't know if it's the knee that's causing him to do this, why he's not sitting out. This was a guy that was a projected top 2 or 3 round pick last year, decides to come back to make it a first round pick, and an injury that obviously is, if it is an injury, is being kept quiet so it doesn't tank his draft stock. But LSU. Look, you got Brian Kelly, a well-renowned head coach, Blake Baker, an excellent defensive coordinator. But the problems stem from their offense. LSU. We obviously saw what they were doing during the Jaden Daniels era, and they won a Heisman with him. The offense looked really good. You were putting up a ton of points, and it was your defense that had the problem. Well, then Mike Denbrock decides or Brian Kelly decides that he wants to keep Joe Sloan and make Mike Denbrock, one of the best offensive minds in the country, a co-offensive coordinator. Well, Denbrock didn't like that, went back up to South Bend to Notre Dame. You see what that offense is doing this year, and you see what LSU is sputtering with this year, and you wonder if Brian Kelly is making good calls. That one, definitely not one. And, looking at his team's schedule the remainder of the year, LSU's in a bad spot, folks. We've already talked about them being exposed as frauds. You get the week one win at Clemson. Obviously, Clemson, not game that's going to be tough to play, but Clemson's 1-3. Yeah, you should have won that one, and I do think the officials took a touchdown away from you in that game. So say you win that game by 2 scores. Okay, that's a good win. You go back home the next week, a night game at Death Valley against Louisiana Tech, and you put 23 points up. 23 against Louisiana Tech, who, I mean, 365 yards of offense is all right. You're able to run the ball for 4 yards a carry against a not very good team. There were glaring signs. Even the LSU Florida game. I mean, if DJ Lagway doesn't throw you the ball 5 times, I'm not sure how well you look in this one. Now, Caden Durham was big in that one and was really the main reason that LSU was successful in that one, and LSU's defense is obviously, I think their defense is fine. Their defense is really good, and it's going to keep them in a lot of games. But I'm starting to think that this LSU team this year is going to be similar to Tennessee last year minus the run game. And if you take away Tennessee's run game last year, they were terrible. 56-10 over your FCS opponent where, I mean, it was probably your best offensive showing of the year with 530 yards, but, I mean, is it time to switch things up in Death Valley? Do you go with Michael Van Buren? Is it time to go with him? But obviously, Nussmeier's not 100%, and throwing him out there at whatever percentage he's at, whether it's 50, 60, 70, is not good enough in the SEC. You get Saturday off, you need it, but then you're hosting South Carolina in what might be a night game. South Carolina's coming off a big win against Kentucky. They got smacked in the mouth by a couple of teams, Vanderbilt and Missouri, but they're looking to get right back on track, and this was a game that hosted College Game Day last year for a good reason. Then the next week, they have to travel up to Nashville to face Vanderbilt. That's going to be an early start on that one, but the last couple times LSU's gone to Vanderbilt, it's been pretty decisive, but that was because Joe Burrow was your quarterback. Now you don't know who is your quarterback and if your quarterback's even healthy. But, just looking at their next 5 games, home against South Carolina, at Vanderbilt, home against Texas A&M, and at Alabama, I mean, if you want any chance of the playoff, you got to win 3 of those, and I don't see it right now. I think you might only win 1 of those games. Then you got Arkansas, Western Kentucky down the stretch, but your last game against Oklahoma is not a freebie. I mean, they look really good, and we know that John Mateer is going to be back by then. So it's looking down at LSU, and I think that if it continues to trend the way it has this season, we're going to see some things get shaken up down on the Bayou, whether it's head coach, whether it's offensive coordinator. But I think next year is going to be a lot different for that. We'll go back to the AP, and didn't mean to go off on a huge tangent right there. We'll go back to the AP poll. Number 10 in week 1 was Miami. Carson Beck. That was all we knew. They had Carson Beck. That was really their big addition in the portal, and he's been awesome. He got away from Mike Bobo, who, I talked about it yesterday, it has a tendency to make players play below their ceiling and not even let them get there. Number 11, Arizona State. Obviously a little too high. You knew they lost Cam Scadaboo. You knew Sam Levitt was probably going to have a sophomore slump, which he had for 1 game, maybe 2. They've looked a lot better since then. Their 1 loss was a game where they got down 17-0 or 17-3 at halftime against Mississippi State, and we saw what they did to Tennessee on Saturday and what they could do to other teams down the road. Illinois at 12, fair spot. They looked really good in the preseason. They looked really good to end last season, and they brought a bunch of guys back, but you lose big running back Josh McCray in the portal to Georgia. But you got a lot of those defenders back, and Brett Bielema is a great coach. I think a little high, probably. I think 15 would have probably been a good spot for them, just due to the fact that, this team went 9-3 last year, sure, but they weren't able to take down any of the big dogs, and ranking them inside the top 12, that makes you think you're a big dog. And because look at who number 12 in the country is now. It's Georgia. Obviously they don't have the same bite that they have, but still a big dog. These next couple spots are they're rough. South Carolina at 13. This was thinking that these were the people that thought Lenore Sellers was going to be the next coming of Cam Newton, that Nick Harbor just ran so fast that nothing, would stop him. Dylan Edwards in that defense were going to be, or Dylan Stewart, pardon, in that defense were going to be awesome, which they've left some things to be desired, and that Roswell Frazon, the transfer tailback, was going to be something. And none of those things have been true. And now South Carolina's at 3-2 on the outside looking in of the top 25, and have really struggled on both ends of the ball. Vanderbilt smoked you. You played much closer against Missouri. You got a big win over Kentucky, but I mean, Kentucky Waste saw their good play against Ole Miss, so it's not much of saying much there. Michigan at 14. This is probably a fair spot. Maybe move them down a couple spots because they still have no receivers. Bryce Underwood and their run game with just anyone really that's running the ball for Michigan. It doesn't have to just be Haynes or Underwood. They have a ton of guys that are really good at running the ball, and I think are going to be great. I just don't know if they're a top 15 team. Florida at 15 was a terrible pick. I mean, they have offensive numbers worse than Iowa, and Iowa didn't even know that offense, forward pass really has been invented. 16, you got SMU. Obviously, rough start to the season for them. Had that big loss against Baylor, who may not look as good anymore. Kansas State at 17, they had a tough start to the year. Obviously, didn't have your running back for the first 3 weeks, and your run game struggled because of it. They've been able to get back on track now, but it could be a long season in Manhattan, Kansas. At 18, Oklahoma, I think this was a fair spot before the season because this was a team relying a lot on the transfer portal. You had Jaden Knott, you had John Mateer, you brought in some Ben Arbuckle, your offense coordinator, and things looked great. They've gone great. Obviously, Mateer is out for a couple of weeks with a hand injury. Don't think that they'll struggle as much as people say they will. But I do, let's just look at the next four weeks for Oklahoma because that is the presumed timeline that they'll be without John Mateer. Obviously, this Saturday, don't have a big struggle. It's Kent State. They've won a game this year, but not much more than that. The week after, you got the Red River rivalry. Texas isn't all what, obviously, from what we've said, Texas is not all what they've shaped up to be. South Carolina, sure, that's an away game, but it's got the early time slot. So it's not playing South Carolina at night. I think that's a much easier game. And then you have an early start at home against Ole Miss. Now that's going to be a great game on October 25th. And the next week you go to Tennessee for an afternoon or a late start. That will probably be his first game back. And I'll just say if Tennessee has their secondary and some of those defenders back, that could be a real doozy of a game. Texas A&M at 19. Connor Wigman out, Marcel Reed in. What do we know about Marcel Reed? Well, we didn't get to see much of his arm last year. We saw him move a lot with his legs, but that was a challenge for Colin Klein and his offensive staff at Texas A&M, getting things ready for the year with this offense. You were getting Le'Veon Moss back. You went to the portal. You got Casey Concepcion. Mario Craver's been huge for you this year. I think this was a good spot to start the year, but I mean, man, has anybody been more improved through these weeks than Texas A&M? Because they have one of the best offenses in the country, and you saw them slow it down and slug it out with Auburn. So I think that's a fair spot for them. At number 20, Indiana. I'll kind of bite the bullet on this one. They were underrated. Fernando Mendoza's been awesome. Elijah Surratt's been awesome. They've been able to run the ball well. Their defense looks good. This is a good Indiana football team. They're better than last year, and I think that they'll probably make the playoff without too much of a struggle. I really do. Now, obviously, it's a different schedule from last year. I gave them a lot of crap for the teams they played in their non-con because it was not good. They're through their first 3 weeks, played Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. I mean, obviously, that's not going to prove much struggle. And then the next week, you play Illinois and beat them by 53. And then the next week you go to Iowa, you struggle there, but you win. And now in 2 weeks you got a game against Oregon. Now you got to travel out there, but other than that, your only other ranked matchup this year is against Penn State. And I think you will probably win that game by 2 or 3 scores. I really do. I think Indiana is that good, and I think Penn State struggles that much. Ole Miss at 21, they're at 4 now, so another contender for really improved team. It was a case of the new quarterback bug. Austin Simmons, what did we know about him? Not much. And then he got hurt, and Trinidad Chambliss came in and has been one of my favorite stories of the college football season. You got a guy that's been at D2 Ferris State that you never heard of, comes to Ole Miss as the backup, then the starter who Ole Miss spent a lot of NIL money on. It's not playing well, gets hurt. So you put this guy in, and he throws for 300 yards and rushes for 50 yards in 3 straight games, something that has never been done by an SEC quarterback. That's incredible. Iowa State, they got the big win in Dublin to start the season and have come back over to this side of the pond and have been doing just as well. Rocco Becht has been awesome. I think their defense has been really good. Texas Tech at 23, they're really high up there now. Joey McGuire's been an awesome head coach for them. A team that has two quarterbacks. I mean, you got Baron Morton, who has been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country, and then behind him, Will Hammond, who's had to come in a couple instances, whether it's late game in a situation where Morton's hurt or they're up by enough that they don't need Morton in anymore. I think Texas Tech set up at quarterback for a couple of years to come. Tennessee at 24, that was a good spot to put them. We didn't think the traditional media did not think Joey Aguilar was going to be anything special. We didn't know anything about their receiving core, and we thought the defense would be carrying them. None of those things have been true up to this point. The receiving core has been awesome. Joey Aguilar has been awesome, and the defense has left much to be desired. Boise State at 25, I probably would have been mad if they weren't ranked in the preseason top 25. If you make the playoff, I don't care if the entire team and coaching staff leave. You should get the respect that you get a number by your name for at least 1 week. And as we saw what South Florida did to them, they didn't deserve it. So, it's funny to look back at week 1 and how much has really changed in the college football world. We've had a lot in just a short couple of weeks. Let's take a look at this week's, or we'll just look around at some conference power rankings, and we'll talk about some teams that have been surprises, that have been not good. There's a lot that, obviously, with the transfer portal now, we can make predictions for months and months and months, and none of them be anywhere close, and that's almost to the point we're at. So we'll take a look over quick to the ACC. Right now in first place, you got Cal at 4-1, 1-0 in conference. I'm going to go to the ACC's official website because I don't know if those standings are accurate. All standings. And, okay, so Georgia Tech in first place, 2-0 in the conference, 5-0 overall on the season. And, I heard an assessment of them yesterday that describes them as the worst, best team in the country, and that's a good way to put it because this team might win 10 or 11 games, but if they make it to the ACC championship, they might fare well, but if they make it to the playoff, they're going to get smoked. And they're going to have to travel. They're going to have to go to let's say, as of right now, an Iowa State. Iowa State will beat them probably handily. Louisville at second at 4-0 overall, 1-0 in conference. Another team that has been struggling. Miami at 4-0. They haven't played a conference game yet. They will get their first underway this Saturday against Florida State. Miami's looked really good, but Miami also hasn't played anybody but Notre Dame, and that game they almost lost. So definitely some question marks about the Canes, but Ruben Bain has been awesome. Obviously talked about Carson Beck. And then Cal and Virginia, rounding out the top 5 of the ACC. It is a strange year. I think Virginia should probably be above Cal because they're 2-0 and Cal's 1-0. But nonetheless, the ACC is fun this year because if you go to the bottom, last place in the ACC at 1-3 and 0-2 in conference play is Boston College and Clemson. Not good. Clemson has a losing record at home. They're 1-2 at home. Their one win was against Troy, a game they probably should have lost. So, man, how the mighty have fallen. And, Dabo keeps saying, if you're tired of winning, I'll leave. Well, it seems that they're tired of winning, and you're still there. Hopping over to the Big 12, right now in first place, Iowa State, the lone undefeated team with 2 conference wins. Arizona State right behind them at 4-1. And then you got a couple of teams that, have they been tested this year? Have they not been tested? BYU, 4-0. Houston, 4-0. Texas Tech, 4-0. I think Texas Tech has been tested. I think Utah is still a very good football team. Houston, not as much. I don't know if they've been tested. You have to have a miraculous comeback Friday night to beat an Oregon State team that is yet to win a game, and they've played 5 of them. BYU, they didn't have crazy expectations coming into the year. I think being 4-0 and 1-0 in conference right now is awesome for them. Utah, with that one conference loss. Cincinnati's still undefeated in the Big 10, or the Big 12, pardon. And the thing about Cincinnati, I think Scott Satterfield may have done a really good job to try to save his job this year, and their offense at Cincinnati. I don't know if you watched their game with Kansas on Saturday. That was a good old-fashioned Big 12 game. That had a lot of points. That had a lot of yards. And just, looking at Brendan Sorsby, their quarterback, I mean, 70% completion percentage, over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, only 1 interception, has only been sacked once. Oh, and he's also their leading rusher with 227 yards on the ground and 4 touchdowns. Now their running back's only 3 yards behind them, but Brendan Sorsby, that's a name you need to keep your eye on in the Big 12. We'll hop on over to the Big 10. Obviously, Indiana is 5-0 overall, 2-0 in the conference. Maryland 4-0 overall, 1-0 in the conference. Oregon at 5-0. Big 10 looks really good right now, but they haven't really started playing each other yet. The bottom half is shaping out how we thought it to be. Rutgers, UCLA, Wisconsin, Purdue in the bottom 4. Northwestern's 2-2. That's a bit shocking. Nebraska 3-1. Their lone conference loss to Michigan, is a big difference in really where they're at right now, because they would be tied for third in the conference with Maryland and Ohio State. That is a funny group of teams to be tied there. Yeah, I really do think Indiana and Oregon are your 2 most intriguing teams in the Big Ten. Ohio State's still the best team in the country. They're not like unbeatable or anything. They're going to be one of those teams that, though, if they're going to lose, they're going to have to beat themselves. I don't think right now. There's maybe Oregon, maybe Indiana, but I don't know if there's anyone in the Big Ten that can compete with them, because it sure won't be Penn State, because they will lose that game 13-10. My prediction right now. Hopping on over to the last of the power conferences, the SEC. Somehow, Ole Miss and South Carolina have already played 3 conference games. Ole Miss has been 3-0, and South Carolina 1-2. You got 3 5-0 teams in the SEC. You have 5 undefeated teams, and they're all really good. I think Ole Miss is awesome. They're number 4 in the AP poll. I think Missouri and Vanderbilt, also at 5-0, are drastically underrated. If you watch them play, they're good. They're really good. And I mean, I would say Vanderbilt's slightly better than Missouri, because we haven't seen Missouri play on the road yet. We've seen Vanderbilt go on the road to Blacksburg and win at Virginia Tech, who obviously isn't great this year, but they won a game at Virginia Tech at Lane Stadium at night. And then they go on the road and play at South Carolina at night and win. I mean, they went into 2 incredibly tough stadiums and tough environments, and they're 5-0. I think Vanderbilt's drastically underrated. Oklahoma and Texas A&M are really good. Bama, LSU, and Tennessee all kind of around there in that middle of the pack. We'll start seeing teams kind of take a jump, but I do think the bottom is, the bottom 4 at least is probably set in stone, with maybe a little wiggle room. But I think Kentucky, Auburn, Florida, and Arkansas are your worst 4 teams in the SEC. I think South Carolina's on the outside looking into that group, and their next 5 games will probably put them in that group, because it is a brutal stretch for them right there. It's not fun. It's not fun being in the SEC, and if it was easy, everyone would do it. Let's talk about some coaches that have been fired, because there's been a lot of them so far through this year. We've seen Sam Pittman hit the road. I think the Arkansas job is one of the most intriguing ones in the world, because of their 2 largest sponsor, Tyson and Walmart. They have a ton of possible money in NIL. I mean, how do you think they got John Calipari there? I think that look at their baseball program, what Dave Van Horn's done there. I mean, it's not like they're bringing in crazy transfers every year, but they definitely have the funds to do it. And football has been the one thing really lacking. And I think Sam Pittman was a good hire at the time, because South Carolina, after Chad Morris, was in the dumps. Pittman got them all the way back up to the top 10 at one point, and then he played Georgia, and Georgia happened in 2021. But it's still been a very fun job for them. I really think that there's a very, very short list, and I'll go back to the ACC standings for this. SMU made the playoff last year, and they are 2-2 right now, and they have not played a conference game. So I don't know if Rhett Lashley's seat's getting hot, but that dude wants the Arkansas job. I think that is the only call they make. I think they force him to say no, and with the money, I don't know if he'll be able to, because obviously the ACC, I don't think, can keep up with the SEC in terms of paying coaches. And I think Lashley's a great coach. He's stuck at SMU, though, and while they're trying to transition into, from the AAC to the ACC, which is incredibly tough to go from a group of 5 to a Power 5 conference team. I think that's a great opportunity for them. And I think, I don't know if it'll get them back to the top, but right now their other option is Bobby Petrino. And, say what you want about Bobby Petrino, but his time at Arkansas definitely had its ups and its downs. He was there from 2008 to 2011, and that were some of the brighter years in Arkansas football. We'll go back and look at the 2008 team. I mean, they went 5-7 in his first year. Obviously, it wasn't great, but the next year they go 8-5. They're second in the division, part third in the division. They go to the Liberty Bowl, and things look good. The next year they go 10-3. I mean, this team was ranked all the way up in the top 10 and made the Sugar Bowl against Ohio State. I mean, that is not stuff you would think of this team to be doing, and we're two really close losses to Auburn and Alabama away from going undefeated in the regular season. And then the last season went 11-2. They won the Cotton Bowl. Looking at rankings, got as high as number 3 in the nation. I mean, they had a last week of the season game between LSU and Arkansas that was number 1 versus number 3. He did a great job then, but that's been 15 years. And obviously, the exit that he made was less than glamorous, and that team had some talent. So I mean, there's nothing to hang your head on that one. So on to the next coach firing. It's Mike Gundy. I heard he was given the opportunity to tell the team that he was going to be fired, or make his announcement that he was going to be stepping down at the end of the year and had the opportunity to coach the rest of the season. But, I mean, he's not going to go out like a quitter. So I understand him just stepping aside. I really don't think that Oklahoma State is going to be able to go after a big-name guy. I think Mike Gundy was probably their biggest name head coach that they're going to have an opportunity to get. Because going back and looking at Gundy, I mean, he coached 21 seasons there, was 170-90 overall, 102-72 in the conference. And other than his first season, they never had a losing season prior to last year. Won 9 games 10 times, won 12 games twice, got the 4 Big 12 championships most recently 2 seasons ago, and won the Big 12 and should have been in the 2011 National Championship game. And, I think he got put in a tough spot. He was one of the people that, like some of those coaches we're seeing struggle right now that are typically good, like Dabo, reluctant to use the transfer portal, and it was kind of his undoing. But I think there are 3 main candidates for this job, maybe 4. Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, the Falcons have had their ups and downs this year, have a ton of talent on offense, and this is why I don't think he's a great candidate. They have a ton of talent on that offense in Atlanta with Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts, Michael Penix, Drake London. ton of talent down there, and for the most part, haven't been able to do much with it this season. Obviously, had a good week last week. J.G. Kine, he's the head coach of Texas State. We've seen the Bobcats look really good the past couple of years. And I think that Oklahoma State's probably going to have to take one of these group of 5 coaches. Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech, went to Kansas State, not Oklahoma State, but is a young coach and is looking for a first-time job, and I think it's a great option for him. I also think that you could go for a guy like a Jeff Traylor, the head coach at UTSA. I think you're going to have to go with a smaller job and one that's a little under the radar. Eric Morris, the head coach at North Texas. The Mean Green have been really good this year, and Eric Morris, 39 years old. That's a young coach and somebody that you could hire and have a long career like Gundy. But if this is one of those that doesn't go well, I think we're going to see Oklahoma State kind of go back to the ways they were before Gundy, and they weren't good. Another coach that has been let go, Deshaun Foster, obviously at UCLA. They have an interesting situation because they are in a terrible spot overall. But it's LA. You're going to have all the recruiting in the world that you could want because Southern California high school football, or really just any part of California high school football, is amazing. And you're in the Big Ten, so you're going to be getting money. I think there are a couple good candidates. I think the first, Dan Mullen. I think Dan Mullen should get a call. He's already out there in Vegas. We've seen what he's done. Made UNLV look good. He's gotten back into coaching. There's just not a whole lot of great coaching candidates. You'd think UCLA would be a great job, but just at what they have there or lack thereof, I think they're going to have a tough time finding a coach. But there's a ton of good candidates. I mean, there's a bunch of really good coaches that are out of coaching right now, and maybe they can pull something a little crazy out of their hat. Another coach that has gone, Brent Pry. I think I think Virginia Tech is an interesting spot. And, man, Virginia keeping on winning has actually been a good thing for Virginia Tech because it means Tony Elliott's probably not going to get fired, which means they have the first picks of any coaches wanting to come to Virginia. Boy, they had a rough start to the year. You lose a tough one to South Carolina that you probably should have had now looking back. And then you lose to Vanderbilt. You get smoked. I mean, I don't know if there's a great list of names to look for this job just because it's in such a weird spot. I think maybe a guy like Ryan Silverfield from Memphis. Memphis has been really good. We saw them beat an SEC team this year, and that's more than Virginia Tech can say. Maybe even like a Bob Chesney from JMU. James Madison's been one of the best teams, best group of 5 teams since joining the FCS or the FBS ranks. I think Jamie Chadwell might be looking to get out of Liberty, or maybe even Alex Golish, from USF. I think he's going to be getting a big coaching job this year. And that kind of brings me to the next team I want to talk about, and it's Florida. I don't think Billy Napier is going to be the coach there too much longer, and I think Saturday may be his last game. So I think the Florida job is going to open up, and I think that there are 2 really good candidates for that job. Alex Golish and John Summerall. 2 young, offensive-minded, great head coaches that have been waiting to take that big step up to the Power 5 levels, or Power 4 levels, pardon. And I think they're the candidates to do it. We've seen Golish especially get some big wins this year. Summerall, I think that loss to Ole Miss and how bad it was may put a bit of a damper on that, but I think he's also a great head coach. But I'm really interested to see where some of these other coaches end up. Sam Pittman, for example, is still a really good recruiter and is still a really good offensive line coach. Where does he end up? I think Deshaun Foster, Brent Pry, and Mike Gundy, for the most part, are probably going to be out of coaching for the most part for a while. And, talking about some other coaches that may be fired soon, I think Luke Fickell and Dabo Swinney need to watch out because, you would think of them as 2 of the more, well-oiled machines when it comes to coaching in these days, and it's just not been that case for them, especially this year. Just a lot of things have not gone their way down there at Clemson, especially. I don't know what it would take to get Dabo fired, but we're probably about to find out. Let's talk about some Heisman hopefuls. I've got my list of 4 guys right here, and real quick, I will pull up DraftKings just to look at a betting odds side of things to who they think is going to be the Heisman hopeful. My list right now, and this is updated as of last week, I think Dante Moore is the front runner right now. It's close, but I think he is the front runner. I mean, going into a wideout in your first big road start and you do that, I mean, that takes some cojones. I'll say it that way. Shortly behind him, and he may not have the numbers to back it up, but I do think he is one of the 2 or 3 best players in the country. Trinidad Chambliss, the quarterback at Ole Miss, he's been awesome since he's had to come in and fill in for an Austin Simmons guy, quarterback that is injured. I think Ahmad Hardy, the running back from Missouri, has been the best running back in the country this year. It's not really close. He's got almost 300 yards more than the guy that's second in the country in rushing, or second in the SEC in rushing. And just looking at the nation as a whole, I believe he's still first in rushing in the nation, and he is by 106 yards. I mean, that should say all it needs to. And the 2 guys that are closest to him play for smaller schools. The next Power Conference dude doing his Hollywood Smothers down there over in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he has 160 less yards. So Ahmad Hardy's the best running back in the nation, and like I've said in years that end in 5, the Heisman winner has been running back for a long time. Obviously, we know in 2015, it was Derrick Henry, running back at Alabama. Going back to 2005, just pulling up the list, make sure I don't say any of the names wrong. Go back to 2005, and you got Reggie Bush. Go back to 1995, Eddie George. Go back to 1985. Who do you have? Bo Jackson. Go back to 1975. You have Archie Griffin. He was a really good running back, and one of the guys that won it, I believe, was the one. Yeah, he won it in 74 and 75. Then you go back to 1965. Mike Garrett, running back USC. Go back to 1955, and you have Howard Cassidy, running back Ohio State. And I'll take you back to World War II. Doc Blanchard, a fullback for Army. I mean, typically runners of the ball, and even back to the first Heisman in 1935, Jay Berwanger, Chicago University running back. So, would this be the first time? As of right now, the betting odds certainly look that way. Right now on DraftKings, plus 750 Dante Moore, plus 850 Ty Simpson, plus 1,000 Jeremiah Smith. I'm looking over here at these top receiver lists and yards, touchdowns. He's nowhere to be found near the top of this list. It is crazy that he is still plus 1,000 in Heisman odds. He's number 18th in the country in receiving yards. So you're telling me a guy with 28 catches, 396 yards, and 4 touchdowns through 4 games is our third in Heisman voting? I mean, there's receivers up here like Mekhi Lemon from USC, 589 yards and 5 touchdowns. Chris Brazzell at Tennessee, 531 yards and 7 touchdowns. Even Jordan Tyson, 483 yards and 7 touchdowns. So, definitely an interesting look there when it comes to Heisman voting. My last guy, I forgot to mention, my last guy in my top 4, I think is Fernando Mendoza. And he's 5th in Heisman voting odds, slightly behind Carson Beck. I think Carson Beck's odds will drop once he starts facing better competition. And now, a fun little topic that something I saw scrolling through X this morning, and probably my favorite tweet I have ever seen. Most FBS wins under each president. We'll go back to the 1860s. Ulysses S. Grant, to be exact. Yale, they won 12 games during his presidency. Princeton won 16 games during Rutherford B. Hayes' administration. Garfield, poor James Garfield, did not get to see a college football team win during his presidency, as he was assassinated prior to the college football season in 1881. Arthur, Yale and Princeton both won 30 games. Grover Cleveland, Yale, 38 wins. Benjamin Harrison, Yale, 55 wins. Cleveland again, Yale and Penn. William McKinley, Penn, won 47 games. During Roosevelt, this is Teddy, not Franklin. Penn with 81 wins. Taft was actually Carlisle School with 39 wins. Woodrow Wilson, Georgia Tech. Warren Harding, an interesting one, a 3-way tie between Notre Dame, Cal, and Center with 18 wins. Calvin Coolidge, USC with 51. Herbert Hoover, USC with 38 wins. FDR, it was actually Duke with 92 wins during his administration. Truman, Texas with 66. Eisenhower, 71 with Ole Miss. JFK, Alabama and Texas tied with 28 wins. Johnson, Alabama with 48 wins. You can start to see some of these more prominent names in today's game showing up. Richard Nixon, Nebraska and Penn State, each with 51 wins. Go up to Ford, OU and Bama with 31 wins each. Jimmy Carter, Alabama, 44 wins. Ronald Reagan was the decade of Nebraska, 83 wins for them. H.W. Bush, that was when the U got started up down in Miami with Jimmy Johnson, 44 wins for them during that time. Bill Clinton, Nebraska with 91 wins. W. Bush, so that's 2000 to 2008. Boise State is tied with OU and USC with 88 wins. During the Obama administration, it was Alabama with 100 wins. During Biden, it was Georgia with 53 wins. And this is compiling both of Trump's terms together. It is currently Alabama with 54 wins. So that will do it for this Wednesday edition of Mark My Words College Sports Show here on the X Sports Network. Tomorrow we will be back, not a Friday show to predict for previews and predictions, a Thursday show this week, and we're going to break down Week 6 of the college football season. It's not as good as Week 5, but it's college football, so it's going to be good. So for Michael Marks, this has been the Mark My Words College Sports Show here on the X Sports Network. Have a good day, everybody.